good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be where you are at. You're listening to the Hump Day Coffee Talk Show. Good morning, everybody. Oh my goodness, here it is, September 7th, 2011. My name's Tom. Thanks for listening to Queer Public Radio. Yeah, we've got a special show today. I don't have a whole lot of time to chat. No, because we're doing a part 2. And for those of you who don't know, there's actually going to be a part 3. Yeah, Joe Quigley. That's who we're going to be talking with. We actually had several conversations on the phone and pre-recorded kind of stuff where I talked with Joe, and we're going to put it out here. Today is going to be part 2 of our Joe Quigley series. Awesome gentleman. Joe Quigley, this is part 2 of 3. If you missed the first part, it's available on queerpublicradio.com. And just not too long ago, about a week ago now, I believe, I spoke with a humble and honorable man who is, in my mind, an unsung gay hero. Today I'm going to share with you some bits and pieces from our 2 phone conversations. This is the second part, as I said, of a 3-part series. This coming Saturday will be our third part and third and final part. Of course, we know there are far too many unsung gay heroes in our world and in its history. Joe Quigley is a teacher, currently retired, who happens to be a member of our LGBTQIA community, a very proud member indeed. In late 1997, while teaching at a very large high school in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Joe was approached by a fellow teacher. She told Joe a story about a local student who died attempting to cross a 6-lane highway. The teacher felt the student's death was a suicide related to bullying. The student's death was ruled an accident, officially. This event would be the spark that lit the flame. Joe Quigley began a journey he thought would be fairly short-lived. 12 years later, and after much turmoil, his goal would be reached. In 1998, Joe took on the Oklahoma City School Board, who, by the way, are elected officials, in case you didn't know. Joe was fighting against bullying for 12 years before it became mainstream, which we now see today. And he was doing so in the most hostile of environments, Oklahoma. Joe lost his job over this fight. It became a legal issue. Joe reached out for help from some of the biggest nonprofits in the LGBT community. They all basically told him because of small budgets, they only expend resources on cases they felt they could win. Of course, these days, now that bullying has become the popular thing, more mainstream, some of those very organizations seem to be quite interested. Yeah. So I got a bunch of audio clips here for ya, and these audio clips you're hearing on these cities are not in chronological order. They're basically, you're listening like a fly on the wall, listening to a conversation as it happened. Joe and I jumped around quite a bit, so between the clips, I'll try to clear up any fuzzy spots for you, okay? Let's get right on with it, because I got a lot of stuff to throw out there and not a lot of time to do it. So, onward, huh? We should do this. Let's start with clip number 1 here. Joe Quigley. It's all about education. That's what we hear. It's all about education. It's all about education. But then what's the first thing they do? Oh, they got to dump education.
Well, you know what the reality is, though? They want to bring, this is my theory and a bunch of other people, they want to bring back all the jobs in third world countries. But if you bring them back to America now, if you're educated, you'll say, this isn't a decent wage.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But if the kids are stupid or dumbed down, let's put it that way, if you give them 5 cents above minimum wage, my God, look how much money they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they need, this is sad, they need the next generation or two to be really, really dumbed down so they don't question anything. Like I would always tell my students, the value of an education is you can question. When you see something wrong, you can question. But if I can keep you dumb, then you won't know there's a question, so I don't have to ever answer it. And you'll do whatever I want. And I think that's what the plan is. Dumb down the kids so they'll accept whatever you give them. Look at politics.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I saw something on the internet yesterday where the biggest complaint right now about Obama is the type of clothes he's wearing on his vacation. They're calling them dad pants. He's wearing dad pants. So he goes out to the beach with his kids. He grabs the first pair of pants over the back of the chair. Okay? He's going to the beach. He's going to take off the pants and jump in the water in his Speedos. But, oh, look at him. He's the president of the leader of the free world, and look, he's wearing baggy pants. Like, that's not important.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's all by design.
Oh, yeah. And if the politicians can get the voters dumb enough, they'll go along with whatever they say, and then they get elected.
Yeah, anymore it's all, the corporate influence. Now that a corporate's a citizen, and it's all about how often their face is plastered on the TV.
Well, like who's that guy, Perry? He talks about how he balanced the Texas budget, and that's his reason to elect him. But what he doesn't tell people, and they're not smart enough to check it out, is he used the stimulus money from Washington to balance the Texas budget. He did it because he's a great politician. No, you took the money that Obama sent your state, you balanced the budget, you condemn Obama for stimulus money, but you don't let anybody think that, wait a minute, because Oklahoma did the same thing. They voted against, or they're turning their back on the health care plan of Obama, but they took the $54 million or something in stimulus money and instituted their own health care plan that's pretty much basically his. So the uneducated people think that the governor and everybody rejected Obama, and they have insurance in Oklahoma, but they don't look the next step. It's like, yeah, because it's Obama's money that you're using. But as long as they're stupid, they'll buy whatever you sell them.
Oh, yeah, like Michelle Bachmann.
Jeez, and she's something. Yeah. She's been a public employee since college. Did you know that? She's never had a private sector job. She's been a public employee, then she ran for this public office, that public office. She's been paid by taxes, and she condemns public employees. Wow. And she's always been one. Her husband gets the Medicaid money for his reparative therapy thing, and she's half owner of a farm, and she gets farm subsidies.
Yep.
And then she turns around and calls Social Security an entitlement. And I'm sorry, she can look at my paychecks. I'm paying into that. That's not an entitlement. I want my money back.
Right.
But she's a beaut.
Yeah, here she is, a politician. You would think she'd know the history of our country and would be a well-educated person. But here she goes off spouting stuff that's like totally incorrect.
If she were up in Alaska, she wouldn't have made the mistake that Palin did. I can see Russia from my porch. She'd be stupid enough to say, I can see Europe from my porch.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when our school system, our education system, our public education system, which we depend on as the cornerstone of the foundation, is failing us.
And they won't know they're screwing up. That's a sad thing. They don't know they're screwing up, the kids don't.
Well, you definitely done a wonderful thing in what you did there, and I think you definitely earned yourself a special place with that one.
I wish I knew what that special place was.
It's a place. It's gotta be.
Okay. There's a special place in hell.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the problem we got down here is this whole corporate mindset where everything becomes about the bottom line. Yeah, it's this whole corporate thing that's causing like this Grand Canyon of a divide we got between the haves and the have-nots.
And the ones who don't realize what they could have. They're, dumbed down enough to think that what they get is great enough. So sad.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago I was talking about a story in California where they spend approximately $8,000 a year on a high school student and about $55,000 a year on a prisoner.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Yeah, keep them out of prison, and it would be cheaper. Educate them,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
But
then they
but
wouldn't go to prison.
yeah, but since the prison system has been privatized, that's the whole thing. It's all about the bottom line.
That's a big thing in Oklahoma is the privatized prisons.
Yeah.
Corporations run the prisons, and of course, somebody gets a kickback like marijuana. Why should somebody spend 10 or 15 years in jail for a joint,
Yeah, really, really.
right? But if the state's paying the private prison, then the people that benefit from that, the private prison owners and the politicians that have the investment, they're not going to change the rule.
Right.
So, but they won't put that money into education because they're not making money out of it.
Yeah, it takes us back again to that whole corporate mindset, even Monsanto, the whole genetically modified crops and whatnot. That's all part of that whole mindset. They're like big sponges. They want everything. Oh, yeah, it's kind of like a war, really. I mean, like in war, they have this, what they call it, collateral losses that are like, there's acceptable losses. That there are acceptable losses. And I think in this whole crevasse that we got developing between the haves and the have-nots of the world, the have-nots are obviously acceptable losses.
The people in charge aren't going to live forever, and by the time they're dead and the damage is going to be done, they're gone.
Yeah.
So they're living for the rich moment. Like the guy Enron, unfortunately he lived long enough to get caught. But his thing was, as long as he lived a high life, what happened after he died? If everything collapsed, it wouldn't bother him. He had a good life.
Right. But it's all about the kids, That's all we hear, from everybody. It's all about the kids.
It's for the children. All the politicians. We got to think of the children. Oh, okay. But you don't abuse them. It's a form of child. To me, it's a form of child abuse.
It is.
Politicians that pretend everything is for the children, and you know it's not. But if you're not smart enough, you think it is for the children. Like when they talk about we have to get the parents involved in education, which is true. But then they never explain what they mean by getting the parents involved in education, like making them read to their kids. And, even if both parents work, there's got to be some days that both one or the other isn't working. So tell the parents on those days, that's when you sit down and you read with the kid, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But when they say parental involvement, now it's come down to basically the uneducated parent is telling the teacher what to do, and the principal will back up the parent because that's the road of least resistance. So the parents think that when they say they want parental involvement, it means the parents are supposed to boss the teacher around, and so nothing gets done.
Yeah, the teacher becomes the fall guy.
Yeah. And if they said, okay, I remember when I worked in Los Angeles, we had one vice principal that he had the right idea. If a kid was suspended twice for like the same offense, okay, at the third time the kid should have been suspended, the parents had to attend a parental class. And he would have an expert come in and talk to the parents about how they could be doing their job better. Like when a parent will come in and say, well, a kid is always fighting. You call the parent in, well, he's not like this at home. Well, yeah, because you got one brother or sister at home. But when you're in a school and you got like 200 or 1,000 kids, there's going to be someplace you can hide and beat somebody up or get involved in a fight, or there's more of an opportunity to be in a fight either as the beginner of the fight or self-defense. And the parents wouldn't understand that. Well, my kid doesn't fight at home. And then this guy would have the parents come in, have an expert come in, talk to them about Well, difference between the home environment and school environment and things they could do it. And it was a wonderful, wonderful idea. But, of course, he did it without any financing. And they wouldn't give him the money for that. But for me, that's getting the parents correctly involved in their kids' education. He would, if the parents would come in and complain that their kids aren't reading well, he had a library in his office, and he would give them books according to the kids' reading level. And the parents would have to come in and report to him what the book was about. So either the parent read it or the kid read it and explained it to the parent, but at least somebody was reading it to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great plan, and that was his thing. Parental involvement means the parents are really involved. They're just not bitching all the time. But nobody educates the parents.
Yeah, we've kind of become a scapegoat society as well. It's like that's someone else's job, the finger-pointing thing. Yeah, and usually it's the person that's on the bottom rung of the ladder that gets to be the person whose fault it is.
Yeah, That's the one whose problem it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the person who caused all of it.
And the sad thing is in education, the big thing is threaten the teacher with taking away their job.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever, and I know this from experience my own and watching other teachers, the principal has a harebrained idea. If you try to point out it's a harebrained idea, well, you're insubordinate.
Right.
And insubordination is grounds for dismissal. So if a teacher wants to be able to teach as many kids as possible, they have to come across as not insubordinate, and they have to, suck it in and do stuff they know is totally wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to effectively teach the kids they're allowed to teach.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. Well, like in Oklahoma, like I was saying, if 50% of the state education budget goes to testing, if you took half of that, you could hire thousands of teachers.
Right.
But, we have to have testing, so they'll increase the class size, 40, 50 kids in the room, tell the teacher, you better do it, but they won't reduce the amount of money they're given to the high-pressure salesman that sold them some testing equipment.
And they won't raise teacher salaries either.
More leeches on society.
Oh, yeah, we got to give you more to do before we give you any more money, because students don't count as more to do.
And the minute the teacher goes, could you give me a little, see, you're greedy. You're not thinking of the children. You're only thinking of your paycheck.
Uh-huh.
And the teachers don't have the big PR machines like the powers that be do.
Interesting, huh? What affects one of us affects all of us, folks. This is especially true when it comes to education. Again and again, we see corporate influence, which only considers the bottom line, affecting our everyday lives in a very negative way. Corporate and political influence in our society have become one in the same. Onward with the conversation with Joe. Here's my second clip for you. Hope you're enjoying. Yeah, kind of scary to think what would happen without the unions. I mean, you had a union. I mean, you could have been treading water on your own there.
Well, in one way they did something stupid. In my case, I won the trial. Are you familiar with what a trial de novo is?
No.
Okay. In my particular case, because I went before the board, they were going to dismiss me, and they controlled the whole process. The whole process of the dismissal is controlled by the administration. So the administrators decided what evidence I could present, whether or not I could have witnesses, and how much time my side would be given to defend me. And, of course, these are the people who are trying to get rid of me. And so the thing before the board is like a kangaroo court. Under trial de novo, I could then go to a district court and retry the case legally to show that they really had no basis for what they presented to the board, which I did. And in a and it was a Republican judge, so it wasn't like, activist judges or anything. When the case went before, it was obvious that the preponderance of evidence was not there. I had more to defend me than they had to get rid of me, so I won the case. And, of course, it's paid for by the union, or basically because of my dues. The state of Oklahoma, I'm the only teacher ever in the state of Oklahoma to win a trial de novo in a district court. That's how strong my case was. Well, the Republicans and everybody, oh, my God, look at that. Teachers are, you can't fire a teacher. You can't get rid of an incompetent teacher. But they had no evidence that I was incompetent. And it did come out it was because I was gay. But the thing that was in the paper, on a particular, in 2006, they actually put in the word sexual orientation. Within 24 hours, it was taken out. The district never explained who took it out because it wasn't done at a public meeting. We went before the board to question this because it's a violation of open meetings laws that they somebody individually changed a major policy statement. And we had two kids who were going to speak to the board as being gay and lesbian and how it was important to have the language. And an administrator, a middle-level administrator, prevented them from speaking by calling them out in the hallway and telling them if they spoke to her, it was like speaking to the board.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, I called her on that. Okay. She tells my principal, this is why they tried to find me, she tells my principal, do something about what he did. And then immediately after 12 years of wonderful evaluations, I suddenly became the worst teacher in the world. Oddly enough, that year my students did the best test scores in the city for English, not in a magnet or a charter school, but in a standard public school. My kids did the best test scores in English. The following September, I was automatically a bad teacher right away. It's like, wait a minute, well, I became bad over the summer, and I haven't even started teaching, and you can tell me I'm bad. So all of this stuff came out in the court. How could he, in June, his kids do the best ever, and then on the first day of school, you start saying he's a bad teacher? And it went back to this administrator who was mad that I had questioned, how could she do this? So that was the long story, and that came out in the court trial. It had nothing to do with my teaching. It was this woman wanted me removed because I had called her on her interference. Well, the Republicans, of course, in Oklahoma, see, here's an incompetent teacher, and because of trial de novo, we couldn't get rid of the incompetent teacher. So they ignored the facts and just went with the emotional crap.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't win any money. The only thing a teacher can get for trial de novo is their job back. And that's all I wanted. I wanted vindication. I knew they were going to pick on me afterwards, but I wanted my job back. Okay? Plus it was my reputation and everything.
Right.
Well, the state does away with trial de novo because look at the abuse. What? One teacher in 100 years wins a trial de novo, and that's abuse of the system.
Wow.
They ignore the facts that the court even realizes. It was a wrongful dismissal. Now, this is how stupid they are, you can still have the union pay your court costs. You're not guaranteed your job back if you win. But if you win, you can go for back pay with interest, injury, monetary injury, stress. You can not just sue the district to get your job back. If I hadn't had trial de novo, I could have sued each member of the school board who voted to dismiss me, the administrator who initiated the dismissal, my evaluator, the principal who okayed what the evaluator did. I could get money from every one of them, plus money from the district in general for pain and suffering. I could have sued them for over $1 million without trial de novo. But with trial de novo, all I could get was my job back. So how do they punish the big bad teachers? They take away our ability to get our job back, and they hand the teachers the ability to sue the district for millions of dollars. Okay, but it looked good on paper that they took away the teachers' trial de novo. And it's like, for me, that's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, what they should have done is say, hey, look, here's a case where it was proven that the administration was abusing power. Let's make rules where the administration can't abuse their power.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody would have had to spend any money. So now you have teachers chomping at the bit, just hoping they're treated like I was treated, so they can sue the district and walk away with millions of dollars for not their job. So they what do they call it? They bit their nose to spite their face.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
when you read the stuff in the paper, it was like, oh, see, it was the big teachers union prevented the administration from firing a bad teacher. But as long as the newspaper doesn't put the facts in, the public doesn't look for the facts.
Right.
Well, what happened was, the trial was supposed to go for 3 days. It went for a day and a half. And on the second day after my testimony in the union's presentation, the judge looked at both sides and said, I would like you to go out in the hall during lunch, come to some kind of an agreement, because he says, I'm telling you right now, it's not going well for one of the sides. But you couldn't say what. Okay. The board assumed it was my side, so they were going to give me 2 months' pay and then cut me off. And she couldn't, when after the trial, she told me she could not believe what the district was thinking. Anyway, when she comes back in, it sounded very good in my favor, and we were waiting for the however, according to law. And she gets to the end of her little speech and was saying, okay, here comes, however, in spite of my personal opinion, I have to go with the law. Instead of that, however, she gets, and that is why, and she backed me up 100%.
Awesomeness, huh? You know, I thought it was quite interesting how Oklahoma removed the trial de novo option. Of course, this speaks volumes in a society that is controlled by lawyers, because lawsuits with million-dollar judgments are much more profitable. These next two clips are a little bit fuzzy, so I'll apologize in advance, but they had some awesome points that I just couldn't pass up. Yeah, I just thought it was too important to let it go. Of course, none of these administrators got in trouble for lying under oath or anything, huh?
No. If we have, this is where the union's weak in Oklahoma anyway. There are a few times where it was clearly perjury. It was clearly perjury. And the union president has no backbone. Oh, that'll just prolong the situation. And my thing is, so to get rid of those administrators, if they're going to lie under oath and feel they can get away with it, the message has to be sent to the administrators. Don't you pull this with teachers. I know in Los Angeles, they would have taken the second step and gone after them, and probably also in Boston, but the union actually let, the attorneys are upset too, my attorneys, because they can't do anything because they were hired by the union to defend me. And they're paid by the union, so they can't do anything on their own. And the president wouldn't allow them to go after the administrators for perjury. But there were quite a few times that even the judge later, when he tried to ignore her ruling and put me back in the classroom, she threatened them with contempt of court. And after that, when we were in the hall leaving, I just gave her a big hug. I said, I don't know if this is what you're supposed to do. I said, but my God, I said, you're the best judge I've ever been in front of, because I was only in front of one. And I gave her a big hug, and she goes, I can't believe you people haven't gone after them for perjury. She goes, I can't because I can't prove it. She goes, but I've heard through conversation, you have evidence that they perjured themselves. She said, why isn't your union going after them? She said, the end result of this is you could have had your job back and they would have lost theirs. the union never pursued it, which is kind of sad. So those people are now still in charge of teachers doing the same stuff. When under oath, my evaluator revealed in the deposition and in the court that before she started evaluating me, she had decided to have me fired.
Wow.
Okay, now this is in response to having called on the other administrators interference. Now, the question we had to the superintendent was, do you think it's possible for a teacher to have an objective evaluation if the evaluator decides before the process that he or she is going to have the teacher fired?
Mm-hmm.
And his response was, well, I certainly hope it would be objective, because if it wasn't, boy, would we be in trouble. And my attorney's response is, where the hell do you think you are, sir? You know, sitting in a courtroom under oath being questioned, apparently there is a problem. No, I hope it's objective, otherwise we'd be in trouble. You are. But then there was no follow-up, so they got away with it. And I think it was because of the gay thing. Get rid of even the union quietly was, let's get rid of the gay teacher and get this over with. We don't want to deal with this anymore. Now I'm reading all the bullying stuff. Okay, I call it the cute factor. I was an older guy fighting for a kid who was already dead, and she wasn't cute. I've seen her pictures since, and she wasn't a cute kid. And nobody would step in to help with the bullying stuff. Okay, and my first thing was, okay, it's because of gay kids. So, you know, the mainstream groups aren't going to step in. Okay, but at least maybe the gay and lesbian groups would step in and help out, because we're trying to protect gay kids against bullying, even if it's the bigotry of a teacher. That's the type of bullying. They would not step in. Now, what's the big thing in education? They're all falling all over each other about anti-bullying.
Uh-huh.
But if you look, it's only because, like, with the straight people, it's been a couple of cute kids. And if you look at the gay cases, it's good-looking young people. And I wasn't a good-looking young guy. I was an older man. I was in, my 40s, 50s at the time. So I didn't have the cute factor. So my only thing is, how many kids have been bullied, or the bullying could have been prevented if I had only been younger and cuter.
Yeah.
You know, and I still have a little bitterness in there that none of the games, of course, once it was over and we won everything, it's like that, little redhead, who's going to help me bake the bread? Who's going to, not me. And then when the hen makes the bread, I'll eat it. So now everybody's, we did this, and we got this language in, and even the local gay groups didn't help. But now all of a sudden, it was because of them, all this was done. And it's like, where were you when, you could have made it go faster? Okay. One group, actually, the Human Rights Campaign, National Gay Lesbian Task Force, and GLAD, when I contacted them about it, their first response was to send me the request for donation.
No.
And when I contacted them, I said, I'm not asking can I donate. I can do that anytime. But I'm asking them for somebody to come and look at this. We don't have time. That was the response. We don't have time. And so I'm kind of pissed at that.
Well, at least you did your part, huh?
Yeah. I have to go with that. I did what I could, and hopefully now it's up to the kids. If the kid is bullied, then, they now have the language. And my thing right now is, like, I actually did run into somebody who complained about, recently anyway, he maybe just turned 21, so the language has been in while this kid was in school. He was aware of the fight going on, and he was complaining how when he was in high school he was bullied. And my thing is, well, with what we did for you, did you do anything about it? Oh, no, I didn't want to look like a complainer.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, shut up, I don't want to talk to you. We got you the protection. You knew you had the protection. And now you're bitching and moaning about how you were picked on. And the only reason you didn't do anything is you didn't want to come across as a complainer then. And you're coming across as a complainer now.
Yeah, even the government now has the website stopbullying.gov.
Yeah. And some of the stuff, like in Oklahoma, they have the big because a little 11-year-old kid killed himself. Okay? And it's sad. I feel sad about it. But if they had listened to us when we were doing it for the gay kids, and we also expanded it, whenever we presented anything about how bullying, discrimination, or harassment was harmful for gay and lesbian kids, we would always stretch it further and point out how it was also harmful for any kid.
Awesome words. I personally love Joe's reference to the quote-unquote cute factor. Got to ask, has our society become so shallow that preference is given to those who are cute? Definitely something to consider. Onward.
Yeah, regarding the death by truck student suicide you previously mentioned, you said she could have walked under the highway instead of over it. I was just wondering if you had any idea how much of a detour that would have been for the student, miles or yards or...
From what I remember, because it was, 12-something years ago, it wasn't that far of a walk, So that's one of the reasons that teacher was concerned that, it wasn't a question that they had to pick that particular place to go across. She had options.
Right. Regarding the I'm calling them the drag show intermissions that you had when you were doing the updates.
Right.
I started, my mind went 10,000 directions on that afterwards. I'm guessing you made an appearance and then left shortly thereafter. And I guess the reason I'm asking is because I saw, recent news about how in some places it's even illegal for teachers to have any students who are online friends or followers or within their circle, depending on what social network you're on.
Well, in this particular case, the drag queen was an adult. The drag queens were adults. And I only went to that place when, I had something. I'd run into her at another bar and tell her, well, we got some information. And then that's when she would say, well, why don't you come tonight or whatever the next show was.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very, very careful, and I still, was to the very end of, what would you call it, anything that could be considered inappropriate contact or socialization. So I don't, like on Facebook, if a kid wants to friend me, no, none of that. And for the most part, I would only go to the Young Gay Lesbian Alliance thing when I was asked to go to it to give a talk. And if it was the rec room, the kids bar, it was only if I had something and I ran into the drag queen before her show, like a day or two before her show. But it wasn't like I'd lurk. I had to make sure there was none of that.
So you were like in and out. You didn't ever get... in other words, what I'm getting at is you didn't enjoy the evening. It wasn't like you went there, had a few drinks, gave your talk, maybe enjoyed the show and had a night out of it. It was just you went there, gave your talk, and left, huh?
Oh, yeah, it was just in and out. Yeah, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Because, again, the idea... not to give anybody any excuse to say inappropriate behavior or he's doing this because, he's a pedophile or anything. I had to really be, even dating adults, I had to be careful who I dated and where I went. So it couldn't be misconstrued, which is kind of constraining.
Now, I also saw in some of this, more of this reading, I saw that I thought I read that you mentioned previously, when you spoke to us about the lesbian assistant principal who was anti-gay, and then, after she realized she wasn't going to be principal, all of a sudden she tried to take your thunder. And and I saw in some of this that I've read since then that you were a roommate with Was that her? You were a roommate with her, or was that a different woman that you were a roommate with?
Yeah. What happened was this is a woman I had taught with, and she was sort of like, I was her brother. She was my sister in a way. You know, we had that type of a bond. And she's the house that I went to and stayed for about a month while I was putting my head together. So I guess we're kind of like roommates. But it was like a month-long thing. She had a girlfriend at the time, and I was just in a spare room until I found my own place and figured out what I was doing with myself. And that's the one who eventually became my principal.
Yeah, okay, there's where I was heading with this now. Is this the same assistant principal, the anti-gay lesbian?
No.
Okay.
This is the thing. The first vice principal was the one I said eventually became the uber lesbian. Okay. The one that said there were no gay kids in high school. That was one assistant. The other person was this friend of mine. You know, like I was saying, we were sort of like brother and sister in a way. And she eventually came over to the school I was at, the high school. And, you know, I was being careful with my friendship with her there because since she was a vice principal, I didn't want any of her chances of becoming a bigger administrator destroyed because of our friendship. You know, guilt by association.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually she became the most important vice principal. We had at one point 2 lesbian principals, and they kind of vied with each other. And she became the preferred one of the principal, you know, and eventually took his place when he left.
Okay, but this isn't the same as the one that was your evaluator, and that's another one.
Yeah, that was the uber lesbian.
Okay.
She was for a while my administrator. And then when my friend, I'll refer to her that way, became a principal, she became, she sort of turned into the same type of Benedict Arnold, as you put it.
Mm-hmm.
She played up her support of the principal, even, like, for example, I don't know if you got to the part where my first principal at the high school, he mentioned that when we went through that thing about the announcements with the Gay Straight Alliance and things like that, and he would love to have a community bulletin board where he could put community events. And immediately some members of the gay community went out and bought a big bulletin board and presented it to him, so that he would have the bulletin board he wanted. And of course it was for all events. It wasn't a gay bulletin board, but we did have a plaque on it that said gift of gay and lesbian alumni of Oklahoma schools. We had that put on there because it was a gift plaque. And it kept disappearing. The plaque kept disappearing, and I kept going out and buying new ones. Eventually, I bought a whole bunch. They were in my desk. Every time the plaque disappeared, I had one at the ready. And one time, the woman who had been my friend caught the guy who was taking the plaque down and chose not to do anything about it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and that bulletin board they gave you, that actually got, didn't it get damaged or something? Didn't somebody,
They kept pulling the plaque off. It was epoxied on, and somebody managed to, this is again, it had to have been an adult, had taken the time to pry it off. And when I epoxied the plaque on, I over-epoxied it. Then we had some custodians come, and they screwed it on nice and tight. So it would be twice as hard to get off the plaque. And apparently the woman who had been my friend came around the corner as this wacko teacher was prying off the plaque.
oh, wow.
Instead of disciplining him for doing that, she let it go.
Oh, wow.
About it. So she started picking up where the other one left off when the first one became the uber lesbian.
Yeah, double standard kind of thing going on there, huh? Well, again, I apologize for the audio quality on that particular clip. The next one's not the greatest either, and the one after that ain't the greatest either. But heck, we get what we get sometimes. While I was editing this last piece, I suddenly realized that Joe had two known lesbians in his midst. So I had to call him back and ask a couple questions, and here's a really, really short clip of that call.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
This is Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, man, I'm sorry. I hope I'm not bothering you.
Oh, no, I'm just being lazy on Labor Day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was here working on the editing this stuff, and I just realized something with the, because we kind of went round and round in our last conversation about the girl that the lady you lived with, and then the uber lesbian, as we were calling her, and they were both lesbians, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and you, at one point in time, they both worked at the same school with you?
Yeah, the first one was brought in by the principal that was giving me a hard time, and then the second one transferred over from the middle school and became the favored of the two assistant principals, and then she eventually became the principal.
Right. Amazing. So you had two lesbians in the same building with you, but they weren't helpful.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, the school secretary at one time told me that if they had worked with me, we probably would have gotten the protection sooner.
Wow. Blew me away when I was editing, and I said, "Oh my God." I didn't click on that the other day because it was so caught me off guard, all the information.
Yeah, it's caught me off guard when both of them were so unfriendly.
I bet.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself, Joe. We'll be talking again.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, again, Joe emailed me further information to help clarify in case anyone might still be confused about the two lesbians in his midst that fought him tooth and nail. The vice principal, who claimed that there was no gay kids in high school, we heard him talk about that, was the person brought in by the principal who had been giving him a hard time about the Gay History Month displays, the posters, remember, and how one of the pictures got cut out and all that kind of stuff, and he couldn't put it outside the door, and it had to be inside, and then blah, 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 blah. So this vice principal, was also the one who was put in charge of the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance, which never had public meetings, and she's also the one who, in violation of the Equal Access Act, would not allow anyone other than members to attend any of those meetings at the GSA unless invited by her. Yeah, she then became the quote-unquote what we referred to several times in the show as the uber lesbian. When she did not get the principal position, all of a sudden she turned again. Yeah, she turned back into being the big supporter, and opened all up and tried to take Joe's thunder. Yeah. She just tried to use GLBT advocacy as a weapon. She went from night to day. All of a sudden she was a good lesbian. Yeah, when previously she wasn't. It was that vice principal about whom the school secretary remarked that they could have made more progress, more quickly, if she had not played her games for possible personal gain or personal promotion. Yeah, and she's also the one who failed when she first made no attempt to get the words sexual orientation into the student parent handbook, again, their diversity policy. She put herself on the subcommittee and could have made the language proposal at the committee meeting and did not show up for the final vote on the language to be submitted to the board, which resulted in the compromise language, or for any other reason, which they put back in there previously. This was before they put in the sexual orientation or gender identity. They put in or for any other reason. Yeah, she subsequently condemned that as selling out, when she did her turncoat thing. The second lesbian, his quote-unquote friend that he lived with a short period, was the one who had been, a close friend of his. He says who she came over to the high school and become a favored vice principal at the same time that this other one was vice principal, the quote-unquote uber lesbian. So this friend came over and became the favored vice principal, and she did get the job. She was the one who eventually did become the principal and was equally obstructive of any progress concerning GLBT advocacy. Remember, she's a lesbian. Yeah. As to do so might have ruined her chances for advancement. In other words, personal gain basically meant more to them than being true to who they are and to the community which they are a member of. This is the one who made a fool of herself with the Betty Davis quote business when he put on, the Betty Davis quote on the union bulletin board as an announcement for the teachers in a teachers area. And eventually she was the same one that was responsible for attempting to dismiss him after he had criticized the regional director. Yeah, he talks a little bit about regional directors in here somewhere. For preventing the two students at his school. Remember, they were going to have 4 students, 2 from his school, 2 from another school, that were going to speak to the board after somebody removed the language sexual orientation. When it was put in, it was gone within 24 hours. And no one ever knew, or no one ever found out. And you'll hear about that too. But the board needed stronger, more specific language in the policies of non-discrimination, bullying, and harassment. She was also the one, his friend, again, the lesbian who became principal, she was also the one who caught the teacher removing the plaque, the plaque for the bulletin board that was donated by the gay and lesbian alumni of the Oklahoma Public Schools group. It was a donated community bulletin board. But she chose, this friend principal, chose to take no action against the person. Yeah. Joe clarifies the subsequent actions, even in her personal life, made it clear that she was an opportunist who supported and befriended those whom she could use to her advantage. He says for at least 1.5 years they had 2 vice principals who were lesbians. These 2 individuals we mentioned, both of whom were not only unsupportive of the efforts to bring diversity into the school policy, but they were obstructive. They actually obstructed progress because of they wanted personal gain. They threw the LGBT community under the bus because of their own personal gain. The first, the quote-unquote uber lesbian, as referred to a couple times, is the first eventually retired to Vancouver, while the second one remained and is still a principal. Yeah. Thank you, Joe, for providing that additional information. I got just a quick question and answer observation here. Question: what kind of society creates self-haters? Answer: one that has far too much religious influence. Let's see, I got several clips lined up here for you back to back. Let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before I'm going to talk again here. And so we're just going to get on with that, huh? Here we go.
So wasn't there also an incident, again, this is the principal that you were, you lived with for a short time, that you kind of had to set aside your friendship, and then you had a union posting? The Betty Davis posting.
Betty Davis, yeah. The Betty Davis quote. Yeah. I wrote to her son. He runs the Skeffington Institute in Boston. I wrote to him about this and just said, hey, your mother would be proud. Yeah, it was just a quote on the union bulletin board because negotiations turned out, we thought it was going to be easy negotiations. It turned out to be tough. So I wanted to get people's attention. So I figured, just throw up the quote. That'll catch people's attention. Then they'll read a notice underneath that basically said, from now on, whatever you get from the union, read it carefully. And this is, again, we're not sure. There's a lot of stuff happening in the background where nobody knows if she took it upon herself to tell me to take the quote down, or was she directed by the principal to tell me to do it. And when she wanted it down, she called me in the office and she told me that, she asked me why I put the quote. And I said, well, it's the union bulletin board. I'm the building representative, and I want to get the attention of the membership. And she says, well, I don't like it. And I said, well, you got to understand your management now. And it's not up there for whether or not you like it. It's up there to get the attention of the union membership. And that's when she said, well, would you do me a favor as a friend and take it down? And my response to that was, if we were friends, you wouldn't have asked me that.
Mm-hmm.
I understood that it had nothing to do with friendship. It's not personal. And I didn't know at that time, was it she was directed to do it by the principal and didn't want to fail following through with her directive, or did she do it to impress the principal and say, look what I could do? Well, I don't know what her motivation was, but that caused a problem. And the union had to step in and point out, and also the in-house council of the school district pointed out that the principal has no control over the union bulletin board because that's a direct agreement between the school board and the union. And as long as nothing was on there to advocate breaking the law or breaking policy, and the administrator just had to swallow it and allow what was up there. And then they went into this thing that even though I was an elected building representative, I technically was not the union. And we had to go through the argument that the representative represents the union. And again, as long as the representative doesn't advocate breaking the law or violating policy, and is just putting up stuff for informational purposes, there is no offense. So she lost on that big time. And I think that's where her problem began, because if she had done it on her own to impress the present principal at the time, she failed miserably. And if she had been directed to tell me to take it down, she failed in following through. And that's when the animosity really began. But she also, when I taught with her, she was a union member, and this was when we were both at the middle school, and a non-union person objected to something that I had put up on the bulletin board, and she actually told this guy that since he wasn't a union member, he had no say on what was up there, and if he didn't want to read it, don't read it. And then she does a complete 180 when she became an administrator. It blew up in her face. Whoever was the instigator of the directive, she ended up looking bad. And I had told her, since she asked me to take it down as a friend, I told her to back off. You know, as friend to friend, she needs to back off, especially when she gave me an official reprimand for refusing to take it down, because she would do that. And she ended up looking bad for that. So, and she didn't like to lose. She wasn't a good loser.
I gotta ask too now, where you posted that was like what, in the teacher's lounge?
Well, it was it's kind of hot. There was a little hallway that led from the main corridor into the main office, but it was a corridor that kids had no business being in. Okay, but for some reason, like it was between the main office and the counselor's office. But both the main office and the counselor's office had its own entrance. So for the kids, it was a shortcut. But teachers objected to the kids using it as a shortcut because it went right by the teachers' mailboxes. And also the teachers, male and female teachers' bathrooms, and we used to get upset. We'd go in there and kids would peed all over the place. So it was basically teacher space, so there was no reason for kids to be there.
I see. Okay.
And she used the fact that kids walked by it as, well, it gives, how did she put it? It creates a negative atmosphere, and we want a positive atmosphere. And, of course, the response to that was going to have the kids enter the office by the front door like they're supposed to, and the guidance officers from their office doors. Stop using the teacher's passageway.
This woman you lived with ended up being the principal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
And interestingly enough, that section about the poster for Gay History Month in 1999, the one that the principal wanted me to take down, I had originally had that on a crappy piece of paper, big size piece of paper. And the month that I stayed at her house, I transferred the list to a nicer type of poster board and had it laminated. And she thought it was a great idea.
Huh.
And then, of course, when she became the vice principal, it was a horrible idea. So she kept changing sides according to what was best for her.
Let's see. Then there was that time that they put out, and I'm not sure who was the principal at this point in time, or who even did it, but the faculty handbook stuff where they neglected to mention parts of the changes.
Oh, yeah, okay, this is where the fun began. This is why it all goes back, there's one thing, it all goes back to Betty Davis, okay? Like I said, this principal did not like to lose. And she really did look bad when even the in-house counsel of the school district told her that it was a stupid thing for her to do, to tell me to take something off the union bulletin board. She assigned a new evaluator to me. This is the woman who played big in my eventual attempt to be dismissed. And she notified us that there were 4 changes to the handbook, the faculty handbook, and she listed all 4 changes.
The page numbers and everything, right?
Yeah, page numbers, okay. And then reprimanded me for ignoring the 5th change that she never mentioned.
Yeah. That's where I was headed. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things is the first step in dismissal is if they can prove insubordination. This woman started that. I'll give you the whole story because it's quite interesting. She started with that I had violated the unmentioned change, which of course when that went through was like, well, you should have mentioned it, because that was an obvious step. Then after that, it was like, let's see if we could get him on stage. But there was a thing called the E1 count. 3 times at the beginning of the year at different unannounced days, you have to write down how many kids during a particular class have ever been physically in your room. They only have to be in it once to be considered physically there. And they would take that number, let's say the number was you saw 30 kids in a particular class, okay, but on the list there were 35. Well, if you never saw the other 5 kids, then they could get a better idea the number of kids who are actually in the school. So potentially, let's say there were supposed to be 30 kids in the room, but there were 5 of them I never saw. Well, that meant that those kids didn't go to school there. Otherwise, somewhere along the line, they would have been in the room. And that was called the E1 count. And generally, they put the slip the morning that they were going to do the E1 count. You get a slip of paper in your mailbox. And sometimes when they were giving them out, they run out of them. And they'd go get some more and come back. The teachers had been in taking them out. So occasionally they might miss the teacher's mailbox putting the slip in. So we were always told, if you didn't have the slip in the mailbox, just write it on a good piece. Don't put it on a scrap paper, but put it on a decent piece of paper. What class it is, how many freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors were in the room, and the date. And the standard procedure was you just take out a piece of loose leaf paper and write it on there and no problem. After she lost the business about Betty Davis, I had gone to my mailbox and there was no E1 count paper. I figured, okay, either they forgot to put it in my mailbox or somebody took something out of my mailbox by mistake, because that sometimes happens. But on that particular day, they decided not to put them in the teacher's mailbox, but to put them on the front counter when we signed in. But a lot of us didn't notice that. It was a sudden change without announcement in the way they did something. So when they call, okay, teachers, it's time to send in the E1 count, rather than hold it up, as a teacher went by and said she was going to the office, I said, okay, I took out a piece of loose leaf paper, wrote my name, the room number, the amount of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors that were present at the time that I had actually physically seen, and she took the paper to the office. And I wasn't the only one who did it that day. But I got reprimanded for not following the policy because I didn't use the correct form.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, eventually, I fought that reprimand and won, because it was established that in the past it had been procedure that we put it on loose leaf paper if we discovered it wasn't in all the junk that was in our mailbox. And if it was going to be a change in policy or procedure, somebody should have told us the E1 count sheets will be on the counter in the main office and not in your mailbox. So she lost again, and she got very upset with that. That was followed by, they have what they call the campus attitude test or something, a form, the OHI they call it. But it was a survey that you took at the very beginning of the year that gauged teachers' attitudes towards the campus and things that might need to be changed. And it was distributed by the administrator and a union representative. And the principal chose the union rep that was going to go down with her to the main office downtown to get the little lecture on how we were supposed to do this. But that teacher had a class during the time the meeting was going to take place, but I didn't. So the union reps, there were 4 of us in the building, decided that I should go because it wouldn't impact any other teacher. So the teacher that was chosen by the principal to go downtown went to the principal's secretary, informed her that she wouldn't be the one going downtown, so they wouldn't have to get a substitute, but I would be the one going downtown because I had that hour free. So we technically notified the front office that it would be me. And my car was parked right outside the building by my classroom. So it would have been very convenient for me to teach the first hour, run out the side door, get in my car, get downtown, so it wouldn't impact my class. And probably, which it turned out to be, I would be back in my room by the beginning of, not the next hour, but the hour after that when I had a class. So it was very, very convenient. And since we had notified the office that I was the one going, there was really no need for me to sign out that I was going to the meeting. They had been officially notified. Well, there's this procedure that if during the day you have to leave the campus for any unknown reason, you have to sign out on a particular form that in this case was way across the building in the main office. So what I did was I simply, at the end of the class when the bell rang, ran out to my car, drove downtown, attended the meeting, sat like 3 seats from her, came back to the building in time for my next hour's class, and simply had my class. Well, she reprimands me because I didn't bother to sign out, which was stupid, okay? And when she tried to proceed with that one, even her own secretary said, yes, but I have it on the calendar here that Mr. Quigley was going to be missing during that hour, so technically I had signed out. So now you have mad about Betty Davis. She's mad about the E1 count. She was mad about the this latest thing, the OHI thing. Then the next thing that happened was we were going to be reading something in class, and I had a whole bunch of Asian kids. This is a Manzanar thing. And I had asked the class, did they know what Manzanar was? Now, I taught in Los Angeles, so we knew what Manzanar was. It was internment camp for the Japanese. And I had taught with a woman who had been in Manzanar. So I was aware of it. And I had the kids open their books, and I think there was like one picture. I figured, hey, let's use technology. Went to my laptop, looked up Manzanar on the computer, and projected some pictures of Manzanar to the students so they could see what it was. Right? Well, I got reprimanded because I did that without getting permission to show something off of the computer to my classes. Now, we had the web filter, so I couldn't show them porn.
Mm-hmm.
Last time you couldn't show anything gay or lesbian. It was considered either pornography of gay or lesbian interest or sexual interest. So those were blocked automatically. To me, what I did was the equivalent of if I was reading them a poem by Robert Frost, saying, oh, I have this other poem, and going to a bookshelf and taking the book off the shelf and reading them the poem. Except this was, instead of just looking at the one picture that was in their book, showing them some that would really get the Asian kids to realize that, you know, they did have a part in American history. Not necessarily good in this particular case, but it would make the story more interesting for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the administration went with the idea that what I should have done was fill out a form and submit it, and wait for the amount of time it would take for approval to return that I could show something off of the internet to my students. Now, this is supposed to be the day of technology, all right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that was previous to that, I had a group of kids. I knew when I was beginning this year, that particular year, a lot of kids, they call them English language learners, ELL, or LEP, L-E-P, I forget the term, it's been a while. But they had limited English proficiency, that's what it was. I had a lot of kids with limited English proficiency. And we were supposed to teach them things like irony and metaphor and simile, but if they don't understand English, what the hell are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a film had come out, I forget the name of it now, but it was a very good film. It was in Spanish. It had English subtitles, so the Spanish kids could understand the story. The non-Hispanic kids, if they didn't know English too well, could read the very simple subtitles, and the English kids, English-speaking kids, could understand the whole story. And it was a very interesting one, kind of creepy. It was kind of creepy, but it had all of the literary elements in it. So for the limited English-speaking kids, if I said irony, and they looked at me like I had two heads, I could say, remember in the movie when, oh, okay. And then later on, when they were better at English, they could understand the term in English, but at least they would have a reference, right? So they would understand, having seen irony, what it is, even though they couldn't tell you in English what it was. And I had filled out the request form before school began, a week before school began, requesting that on the first day of class, I begin showing that movie with explanation and, questions every now and then to make sure they're understanding the story. And then I could use that as the basis of instruction. And my evaluator, the one that found fault with Manzanar and these other things, she waited until the 8th day of school to come and ask me if I would get her a copy of the movie or the film so that she could review it. And I told her, it's a little late now. This is something I gave you a week before school, and according to the policy, 5 days before, at least 5 days before you intend to use a video, you had to fill out a form. What was the name of it? What was it about? What was the educational value? What objectives did it cover? And I had done all of that. But unfortunately, when I went to the office to get the form, they hadn't run them off yet. And myself and the secretaries had practically ransacked the office looking for them. And finally, since we couldn't find them, I did it on loosened paper. I followed a form I had filled out for something else, and I basically rewrote the form out in handwriting and answered all the questions in the order in which they were asked. Plus, I gave them more information than the official form asked for. Well, one of her objections to not getting around to giving permission was I didn't use the correct form. So I wanted to see this on a look at things. Then we brought up that because there were no forms available until the second week of school, I had done what anybody would do and written it all out officially on another piece of paper so that they would have the same information that would have been on the official form, and I did it within the time limit, which was at least 5 days before the intended showing. Her excuse for not getting back to me was, this is a killer, although it said that the teacher had to fill out the form and submit it at least 5 days in advance of the intended viewing, nowhere did it say how long the administrator had to answer the teacher back. So potentially, it was okay if they hadn't responded until the end of the year, which is ridiculous. Okay. Well, that also came out that, again, they were told, you can't be that stupid. If it says the teacher has 5 days, then it's reasonable to assume that within a day at least you're going to get a response, or within a 5-day time limit, not 9 days later to be asked, well, can we see the video, when they could have gone out and rented it. And it was a famous movie at the time, so they could have rented it, no problem. So the union began to realize, as I did, that they were looking for things. Now, it gets even better. The year before all this happened, I had advanced English classes. And I went to parochial high school. I had, a strict Catholic priest as teacher. And they taught everything. And they were tough. They were like male nuns. When I first started teaching, I got a job at a parochial high school, a college prep. Okay, so since they gave me in public school the honor student, I treated them like they were at a parochial college prep high school. This is what you had to do. There were no excuses, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the year, when they took the No Child Left Behind test, 100% of my kids did very well in the test. Statistically, it came to 60+% had placed advanced. Over 30% had done the next step. 4 kids, 2 of them weren't mine, but for the sake of the testing, they tested in my room, so suddenly I became responsible for their education, although I only saw them on the day of the test. 4 kids had done the 3rd level down, but nobody had done poorly on the test. And basically, my kids had done the best of any sophomore class that year, not only at our school, but at the other school. Now we're getting into the meat of it, the juicy part.
Okay.
Juicy. So anyway, my kids had done very, very well. The logical thing would have been, since he did so well with the honor student this year, give him the honor student next year, if he can do it again. All right? Makes sense. But instead, they gave me the limited English proficiency students. Now, this made no sense. Because if it was all about test scores, it my kids had done as well as they did on the test, why wouldn't I have had the same group of kids the following year? So that was something that would be hard to explain to anybody, why they did not give me the same caliber of kids, because they had done so well. So the formula OHI thing came in, the E1 count thing, the man's not. It was all to show that the reason they didn't give me the honors student second year is they really knew I was lousy. But they couldn't prove it from my test scores because I had done better than what they even anticipated. So they had to prove me incompetent after the fact, because a lot of people had the question, if his kid did that well on the test, why didn't you give him the same caliber of kids the next year? And their thing was, well, he was lucky, but he's not really that good of a teacher. Well, how can you prove that unless you give me the same caliber of kid and I don't do as well? So they screwed up. So what they had to do after the fact was prove I was bad. And they were screwing up Eddie Davis, E1 count, OHI, all of that. That was also the year, in October of 2006, they took the student and parent handbook off of the district website because they were going to redo the website. So they had to take major documents off. When the document came back on, or when the web page went back up, it mentioned sexual orientation in the discipline code under the section on harassment. Now, to back up a bit, I had been on the handbook, the student parent handbook committee for a couple of years. Every now and then they would revamp it, and every time they did, for about 4 times I was on the committee, and I was always trying to get sexual orientation into the student parent handbook. In May of 2006, at the end of the year, the proposed language of the handbook, or the section on the student code of conduct, was given to all high school teachers during faculty meetings to read and give suggestions. And sexual orientation was in there, so it wasn't a surprise. In the fall of 2006, the person in charge of the handbook presented it to the school board, who accepted what was presented to them, which means they accepted sexual orientation being one of the things that you could not harass a kid about. So we felt kind of good. Right? In October, when they took the old handbook down and the new one appeared on the district's website, the word sexual orientation were right where it had been in the May draft version. So everybody was happy. They did it. Within an hour, the handbook was taken back down. And about 2 hours later, the handbook was put back up, and the word sexual orientation had been removed. Okay, now the big question is, since it had been presented to the board in a public meeting, and there was no objection, who took the wording out? If the board took it out, then they violated the open meetings law because they never had a meeting about the handbook. So that violated the law. If it was anybody other than the school board, then there was a bigger problem because an individual usurped the powers of the board. So we went, when I say we, in this particular case, there was 2 ministers, there was a politician, myself, a couple of members of the gay and straight community, went to the school board one particular night and demanded to know who had taken out the wording, and had there been a meeting of the board to go over the wording, but in violation of the open meetings law because the meeting was never posted. And we never got an answer. So that was in October. In November, a group of us went before the school board again to demand the answers. And this time there were 4 students who had volunteered to talk to the school board. 2 are from my school, and 2 are from a different high school. And we have these things called regional area directors. It was a middle-level administrator that was in charge of a high school, the middle school that fed into the high school, and all the elementary schools that fit into the middle school. Kind of like in Los Angeles, they have regional superintendents underneath the major superintendent. So the 2 kids from a different region than mine got to talk to the board without any interference. In my region, the director of the region had the 2 kids come out in the hall to talk to her, and she told them talking to her was the same as talking to the school board, which was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So in my way of thinking, she had interfered with a very important moment where students were going to speak on their own behalf to get protection because of sexual orientation. And I got upset. To put it simply, I got upset. Now, up to this point, I had been sending emails during my school break, during the planning period, or during lunch. Anytime I had a question or I had information, I would send it to the superintendent through the email system. The superintendent covered myself by sending it to the attorney and the union and whatever administrator it was relevant to. And no one ever objected. Well, the morning after the meeting, when this woman, this administrator, interfered with the 2 students speaking, I sent an email to the same people I normally sent them to. And this time, however, I was reprimanded by the principal, who used to be my friend, for sending emails during instructional time. And she included lunch and my planning period now as instructional time. So the first time, and I think it was 06, so for the first time in 6 years, there was an objection to me sending any emails between 8 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought this was kind of coincidental because it was, condemning the administrator for stepping in and preventing the 2 kids from talking. So I was reprimanded for misuse of instructional time, and obviously this was going to interfere with my students' performance on the test. So this was a big argument. They reprimanded me for it. I grieved it. I lost the grievance on a technicality type thing. And, of course, their thing was they justified their sudden objection that they had never objected before because it would interfere with the performance of my students, and that was the year that my students did very well. So we proved them wrong. It did not interfere with my students because I didn't take away from instructional time. I was using time when students weren't in the room. So again, they blew it. And then that was the following year. I was given the limited English proficiency students and stuff like that because they were going to show, they assumed that my kids were going to do poorly because I had used instructional time to advocate for gay and lesbian students. I had politicized my classroom. Well, then they couldn't justify, like I said, why the following year I wasn't given a chance to repeat my success with the students. You see the problem they have, okay? And that's when the OHI, the E1 count, and all of that came in. Well, at the end of that semester, the following semester, which would have been 2007, the 2007-2008 school year, I was put on a plan of improvement because I had too many reprimands in my file, but legally because every time I grieved a reprimand and I won, those reprimands were supposed to come out because they were shown to be faulty. So you couldn't use them against me, but they did. So, long story short, I had to grieve the plan for improvement, but the grievance process took so long, I had to complete the plan of improvement until I won the grievance, and it was decided that I should not have been given a plan of improvement. But, it came kind of late. But technically, I won the moral victory. I proved that they were misusing the evaluation process. Okay, so the next year begins, okay? And it's the same sort of a thing. If I walked in the room and I put my left foot in first, then I was reprimanded for not walking in with my right foot. They were looking for anything to use against me the following year, and it was obviously leading up to an attempt to dismiss me. And it was so obvious. And at the end of that semester, I was given another plan for improvement, which was impossible to fulfill. And the union was upset because every time we'd go to a meeting about one of these reprimands I was receiving, the principal refused to answer any questions. And at when you receive a reprimand, you have a right to ask for clarification on certain things. What did you base this statement on? A teacher is abusive. Not that this was the case, but let's say, for example, the teacher is accused of being abusive. Well, the teacher has a right to ask, well, what situation are you talking about? Because it could have been a perceived abuse when, in fact, it wasn't. Okay? But the administrators refused to answer any questions, and they would simply hand me the reprimand and call the meeting over. So there was something going on. The union was suspecting something going on. Well, then I was notified that they were going to recommend my dismissal based on all of this crap. And you can see that it was just crap. And generally what happens, when they vote to dismiss a teacher, the teacher just quietly goes away, okay, because it's too embarrassing. But in my particular case, they still didn't have solid language in the handbook. We still didn't know who had removed the word sexual orientation. So I had that thing. I couldn't just quietly go away. I had to keep fighting because it wasn't just my job at stake. It was the protection of the gay and lesbian kids.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of quietly going away, I had to go to a dismissal hearing. Now, this is the weird thing about the dismissal hearing. Regardless what evidence you have, remember I told you the situation where they would claim there was certain things weren't hanging in my classroom, but I had pictures of them sitting right next to the thing that supposedly wasn't there?
Right.
Okay, well, we couldn't present any of that because the administrators could control what evidence was presented by my side to the school board. And obviously, they wouldn't allow anything that was in my favor. So one of the charges, for example, was I didn't involve the students in the learning process. So any videos we had of my kids being involved, any pictures of my kids being involved, was, according to them, inadmissible. If I was going to show anything in my classroom, it had to be pictures of me talking to the kids. So the night of the dismissal hearing, they showed a video of me lecturing to the students as evidence that I never involved the students. So, of course, if you control the evidence, you can control what is being shown.
Mm-hmm.
The other rule that they came up with was I couldn't have any eyewitnesses in my favor. And so I should be able to talk. But they decided that because the union was representing me at the dismissal hearing, I was merely a witness, and therefore I could not testify in my own behalf. Now, how stupid is that?
Yeah.
Even if I was asked, as I was, a direct question by a member of the board, I could not answer the question. So needless to say, if a board member said, have you ever done this, whatever it was, I had to sit there quietly so it looked like, well, I had no answer to the question. if I had any evidence that the administration didn't approve, again, it couldn't be shown to the board. So it's obviously all the hearing is a kangaroo court is basically what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it came time for the vote, this was the best part. They break into executive session to discuss the situation. The law is the burden of proof is on the administrator, because obviously they control the process. The burden of proof is on them. If they don't meet the burden of proof, then technically I win. And there were 7 board members. When they came back to the vote, one of the board members had gone home. So she couldn't vote either way. 2 board members voted directly in my favor that enough evidence wasn't shown. Another board member stated categorically that neither side had presented a strong case. Now, I didn't have to present a strong case. The other side had to present a strong case. So when she said that neither side proved their case, by law, she should have voted for me. But she didn't. She voted to abstain, and she basically broke the law. And because of the way the voting went, let's see, there were 1 left, 2 in my favor, 1 abstained, 3 voted to dismiss me. So the vote was 3-2. So they voted for dismissal. You can see there's something wrong here, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, in practice, let's put it that way, I should have quietly left. That was the thing. Any teacher that was voted to be dismissed generally quietly left, but we still didn't have the word sexual orientation. And my thing is, if I quietly left and nobody else picked up the fight, then we wouldn't have sexual orientation. Okay? So whether I wanted to leave or not, personally, for the sake of, if you want to call it the cause, I was obligated to stay. I was trapped into staying. So we did something that had never been done in the district before. I called for trial de novo, which means I get to bring my case to a trial of newness, I guess is what it's called in English. The case is presented in a district court before a district judge who decides whether or not the district actually fulfilled its requirement of proving their case. And the only thing you can get for that is you get your job back. So we filed for trial de novo. Over the summer, they did the depositions. My evaluator admitted under the deposition, which is also perjury if you lie. They were under oath to answer the questions honestly. It looked like it was going in my favor. The other side looked kind of stupid in their answers, the questions and answers. When we were talking to the principal, my former friend, and my evaluator, who was a jerk. And I passed a note to the attorney. And his thing was, and he was a nice guy, but remember, he's the attorney. I know my job teaching. He knows his job as the attorney. And he asked some very good questions, but there was one that bothered me. So I passed him a piece of paper. He gave me a look like, don't think you're an attorney. I'll ask the right questions. And as we're packing up to go, and people are still under oath, he finally asked my question, and it was, when did you decide that Mr. Quigley should be dismissed? And he figured he'd get some bullshit answer. So he was packing his attaché case, getting ready to leave, and my evaluator said, I decided before I began evaluating him that he needed to be fired. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. You evaluate first, then you make that decision. You don't make that decision and then make sure that every document backs up that decision. So it automatically made every document she had suspect. Plus the fact that we couldn't show any evidence to the board. In a trial de novo, I get to show, I guess I was the plaintiff in this case, but I get to show whatever evidence I have to back up my claim, and the district can't control it. And when she came out with that, well, I decided before I evaluated him that he needed to be dismissed. It backed up all my claims that she ignored the facts of what I was doing so that she would only present anything that backed up her wanting to have me dismissed. And when they talked to the superintendent during his deposition and they asked him about that, is it possible to have an objective evaluation if the evaluator decides before the process that the teacher is going to be dismissed? Can it be objective? And his response was, well, I hope it's objective because we'd be in a lot of trouble if it wasn't. How stupid is that? So anyway, we ended up going to the trial de novo, and it was supposed to last 3 days. And the first day I was sweating it because, boy, did they make me look bad. You know, and they were presenting the same evidence to the judge that they had presented to the school board. And if that was it, I was screwed. But my attorney turned to me and said, don't forget, tomorrow is our day. Well, the next day, after there was 5 or 6 administrators who testified against me, most of them were testifying according to what they had been told by the principal, the superintendent, and my evaluator. So when they showed a video of me standing in front of the classroom and yapping away at the kids, okay, well, yeah, that backed up their claim that I had just lectured the students and never involved them. Well, the next day it reversed because we could show all of the video that the school board was not allowed to see, where kids were standing on desks doing Romeo and Juliet. They were out in the hallway, and I videoed them as they were doing the bells by Edgar Allan Poe in different parts, like a choral recitation. Kids doing Antigone, Sophocles' Antigone, playing different parts, and the kids who didn't volunteer to be the major characters had to be the Greek chorus. And all these things that even one of the board members said, had we seen this, our decision would have gone the other way. But it was presented to the judge, and the judge, what the hell is he keep talking about? He never involved the kids. Because we showed all the video and all the pictures we weren't allowed to show to the board. And some of the administrators who had testified against me were very upset at that because they realized they had been lied to. I think I told you last time, 2 of them I know of who left the district soon after that because they didn't want to be part of this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The superintendent, the wonderful thing the superintendent comes up with was during his deposition, my attorneys asked him, did he ever, like I had offered on more than one occasion to speak directly to him when I knew something was going on. I wrote him a big 15-page letter. And I said, these are facts that you need to know. I would like to sit down and discuss these with you. And he refused to have those meetings. Well, it turned out he should have had those meetings because he had been lied to. But now he had to protect himself, and he had to protect the people under him.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised they let them testify. I mean, if they were just testifying as to what they were told by somebody else, that sounds like hearsay to me.
Yeah, but they didn't. They see, this is a situation, and a lot of teachers are up against this in most districts, but the public doesn't know about it. You have the administrators who think for some reason, because they're never questioned, if a teacher questions an administrator, teacher's out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So they get away with a lot of stuff because people are afraid to question. So I think it was the mindset that whatever they said before the judge would be just as acceptable as what they said to the school board. But this was a bigger thing. And like I said, I was the first teacher to do this, at least in the school district. So they were going with the idea that whatever they said would be believed without question. They didn't realize we were no longer in their arena. They were in a place where they had to justify and prove what they said to be true. And the superintendent, both in his deposition and in court, pointed out that his management style is he trusts the people below him. So whenever a report from an administrator crosses his desk, he never questions it. Because, of course, his administrators would never lie to him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is obviously a case where, since I offered to sit down and talk with him, if he had taken that opportunity, he would have seen, they're lying to you. They're going with the idea that you don't question them, and it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. Well, it did in court. Because even the school board member, the most vehement anti-me school board member that had been on television, oh, this is the worst teacher I've ever seen, according to the evidence I've seen, blah, blah, blah. When he testified on the first day, it's like, yes, this is the worst teaching I've ever seen. Well, on the second day, he had to change his tune because he saw the evidence he was denied at the dismissal hearing. So this is like, holy crap, so they really looked bad. But it basically came down to they didn't prove their case.
Mm-hmm.
They just made one accusation after another, but had no evidence to back up the accusation. But I had the evidence to show they were making it all up. And I won the case. So I got my job back, which didn't end the harassment, but at least it was, hey, a teacher won the particular case. And then to make it even more comical in a way, the judge ruled in my favor from the bench. She stated, that I should be reinstated to where I was, and the dismissal is thrown out, and I win. Between the dismissal and the adjudication of the trial de novo, because technically the teacher may not have been legally dismissed, you get your regular paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened over the summer, so it didn't cost the school anything extra because we're paid for 10 months, but they put a certain amount aside every month. So you're paid for July and August with the rest of your paycheck. Okay? So even if I had been dismissed, I would still get my July and August paycheck because it was money I earned they just hadn't given me yet. So by the time they adjudicated the case, I had gotten my last paycheck. And then, of course, I started getting my regular paychecks because I was reinstated. But the law is, no matter how long it takes, for the amount of time, just in case the teacher wins, the teacher is paid regular pay and everything like they're working for the length of the trial until it's adjudicated.
Oh, goodness. Sorry, that caught me by surprise how that ended because, see, we had another section that went on to that, but we're running short on time, so we're not able to include that final section. I'm sorry. Yeah, sometimes the timing doesn't work out, but that's why we're having a third show on Saturday. Yeah, on Saturday we'll be hearing the third and final part of the Joe Quigley story. That's in case you're not sure who you've been listening to here. That's what we've been talking about is the Joe Quigley story. He's a teacher from the Oklahoma City School District who back in 1997 started a campaign to add the wording sexual orientation to the diversity policy. It actually ended up one step better. You'll hear about it in the third part. They actually ended up with sexual orientation or gender identity. Yeah, goodness gracious. Yeah, that's an interesting part of their story. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. You'll have to listen to the third part of this. Just in case you missed the first part. Yeah, it's on queerpublicradio.com. You might want to check it out. The first part of
the Joe Quigley. Some of it's a little bit repetitive because I know a lot of people aren't going to listen to 3 2-hour shows. That's 6 hours worth of their daily lives. Yeah. So, some of it's a little bit repetitive, and a lot of points are made on the multiple shows. It's not chronological. It's just like you're sitting like a fly on the wall watching and listening to a conversation that two gentlemen are having about an awesome experience of an unsung LGBT hero. Yeah, Joe Quigley. It's an awesome thing. If you search his name, it's spelled Quigley. Joe is common spelling. If you search Joe Quigley on the internet, on Google or whatever, you'll find out a lot of stuff. This guy was all about, adding equality to the non-discrimination policies in the school district. At least 10 years before anybody else was even thinking about it. Just think of all the lives, because we all know. Well, like for example, in Bachman's school district, it's in her region. Goodness gracious, I think that's the area that's had the most teen suicides than any other school district in the United States, if I remember correctly. I think they've had 7 to maybe it's 9 in the last year and a half or 2 years. Yeah, amazing, huh? So anyway. This story, we're starting to get into some good stuff here about the legal case and the trial de novo and it going before the district judge. And congratulations, Joe, he won. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. But, I think about flipping that coin over and thinking about the other side of this story, and I just got to wonder how many teachers have been railroaded out of the teaching industry by unjust and unscrupulous school administrators. How many teachers? Or how many have been just kind of disdained by the whole teaching thing? It wasn't what they thought it was going to be because of this environment, this hostile environment created for people that actually want to do the best for kids and realizing they're within a system that evidently doesn't have the same ideals. So this coming Saturday, we'll be airing the final parts of the conversations between Joe and I. We had two conversations. I think one was like a little over 4 hours, and one was like a little over 3 hours. And, yeah, we talked a lot, so that's why we got 2 shows. And I think it's awesome, the work that Joe Quigley has done. Goodness. If you're catching this podcast on iTunes or listening to this live and you're not going to check the podcast, you ought to check out the podcast because I seem to remember, I think we mentioned it on the last show, maybe not. Maybe it's in the, it all runs together with me because I already had the conversation. You haven't heard it all yet. But at one point in these 3 shows, Joe lets out the fact that he's a caricature artist. And so... in the picture from the podcast on the last show, I posted a picture with it, and you can see the sign that Joe is holding up, and because it's when he's, I think it was when, I don't remember what picture I put out there, whether the one when he was the Grand Marshal or the one where he was just marching, but either way, he's holding the same sign up above his head, the poster, and you can see a caricature of his likeness of his face, and on the sign that he's holding, the sign says "Gay Teacher." And the caricature is one he did himself. So in the podcast posting today, to check out these podcast postings so you can see these pictures. That's all I'm trying to say. Because the one today is going to have I think 3 or 4, maybe 5, I don't remember, caricatures, basically a cartoon-like drawings, political kind of cartoons with, some writing, blah, 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 that Joe did, and he's given me permission to put them on a posting today. So when I post the podcast for this show on queerpublicradio.com, it will also have, some more interesting pictures. So you might want to, if you haven't checked out queerpublicradio.com for these podcasts with Joe, you might want to, if you want to see the pictures, huh? Don't forget, folks, we have a live show 2 days a week. My name is Tom, and you're listening to queerpublicradio.com. We bid everyone happiness and positivity. We try to throw it out there all we can. Some of the things we do is they're, with a purpose in the mind, make people stop and think and make people realize that we all can't just continue going on like like nothing's going on, because there's so many problems and issues. Like I said at the top of the show, about that being an observer. So that's kind of like the ostrich sticking their head in the sand, or the possum, playing dead. I mean, playing possum. Anyway, if you can't get involved, in any active way, you can always help us out here at Queer Public Radio. We can always use the help for anyone that can afford it. If there's any people out there that wish to be sponsors and blah blah blah, underwriters, etc., we're open for any ideas and help here, because Queer Public Radio is not just similar to the name National Public Radio, NPR, QPR. Yeah, we're kind of like on that same vein of trying to be a community outreach kind of thing. We got a new advertising program. You might want to check it out. It's over in the extras button over there on queerpublicradio.com. And we'll see you this Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time. And of course, we'll see you next Wednesday as well at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. All the best to you and yours. See you Saturday with part 3 of Joe Quigley.